Jeff Fuller with you, Jay Fuller Interviews. Please subscribe on YouTube, Jay Fuller Interviews. We're on Instagram and Twitter, Jay Fuller Interviews, and you can certainly join the Facebook group, Jay Fuller Interviews. And I'm so excited to have us on all the podcasting platforms, the Backfire Podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews. We are on Google Podcasts and iTunes. Just search the Backfire Podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews. I certainly love people's stories because it will make our stories better, less ignorant, and more impactful. So take the time and listen to unlearn what you always thought was right, to relearn what is right, and to learn from one another. So one with a tremendous story is Sam Perkins. Sam, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I remember when I was on WDEV, that local radio station in Waterbury, Vermont, several years ago. You came and it was not the highlight of UVM basketball, but it certainly was some fun days. Did you enjoy making the trip to cover the Catamounts?
Yeah, man, it was always fun. You know, when I was covering them, it was always exciting. It was fun to go up there and take in some games when they had, my guys like Taylor and TJ way back in the day. It's not so fun a place to go to travel to as an opponent if you're going up there to play. But once you get, if you're not going up there to play them, and chances are lose if you went and played them anytime within the last, 20 years at this point, going back to 2001, 2002, if you were going up there to play against them, chances are you were losing based on the odds. But outside of that, it's always a really fun time. Even though it's a couple hours from the Boston area, it's a great time, great atmosphere. Great teams. Patrick Gym is just such a historic place to be. There's such an energy up there. Even long after, it's funny, after like Tom Brennan had retired and TJ and Taylor had moved on, Trevor Gaines, one of my all-time favorite people, was no longer up there. Even lesser guys like Grant Anderson, Scotty Jones, all these guys that, it's like, it's one of those places that you can still kind of feel that energy and still feel all those people, even after they had moved on to different phases of their life. So it was always a good time to go up there.
So Sam, you went to Northeastern. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is right across the river from Boston City. When I was there, it was very diverse. I think, unfortunately, it's really becoming more and more wealthy and elite and gentrified. And so I could never afford to move back there, as could very few people that I grew up with. But when I grew up in Cambridge, it was really, I couldn't think of a better place to grow up, as far as I met so many different people from so many different walks of life, races, socioeconomic backgrounds, religions. And it was a city, and there were all different parts of the city that have different vibes. But it wasn't so massive that, it swallowed you.
Yeah. Hey, so, excuse me. We're talking about One Bid Wonders. What gave you the idea for the One Bid Wonders, and how you just kept that going? And I just want to state that on Facebook, you've been reliving so many different memories by Facebook posts, which are a lot of fun. But where did that begin?
So it's funny, growing up, sports are a big part of my life, and played, I would say all of them, but I wouldn't say all of them. I would say, baseball, basketball, football were like my life growing up through high school. And had the opportunity to play some after high school and college. And I don't really talk about my own sports career much because of things that happened in my life that make it kind of a tougher subject to talk about. But I would say that it was a connection with my dad, who I was really, really, really close with. And, when I was a little kid, grew up going to like UMass Amherst games back when UMass was, the number one team in the country, and they had John Calipari and Marcus Camby and Lou Rowe and all those guys. And it was a time to really bond with my dad. And when I got into high school, I had all my own sports going on during that season. So making the drive out to Amherst wasn't really as easy, and UMass wasn't really as good at that point anymore. And we started going to Northeastern and BU games because they were right in Boston, and it was a very different feel, but I really loved it. And it was a way to stay connected with my dad. You get to high school, and I think it's natural for a lot of us that we want to do our own thing. and maybe we don't spend as much time with our parents anymore because it's, we want to be cool and be independent and whatever. But it was a way that, it was unspoken, but it was a way that we could still do stuff together. Mm-hmm. And my dad had been, a really great basketball player, played out at UMass Amherst during his own time. And I wasn't blessed with his height, unfortunately, but it was a way for us to stay connected. And I really started getting into going to those games. And then, he had a car accident. He passed away. I was having my own beginnings of my athletic career in college when that happened. And then I really kind of really struggled for a long time and had a hard time sticking with sports, which had been my life up until that point. It just kind of felt like he wasn't there anymore, but I still continued to kind of follow the America East and be involved in that even after my own career came to an end. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. When I got done in college, I had the opportunity to play some professional baseball, and then that didn't really do it for me. My heart wasn't in it. My head wasn't in it. And I was like, man, what am I going to do here? And I like to write, and I continued to follow the America East. And for some reason, I just really love the human interest nature of it, the small colleges that aren't covered. It was kind of on a downswing at that point because you had Taylor and TJ and Vermont winning against Syracuse, and then the league was kind of rebuilding. Northeastern had left, and, it wasn't as – it didn't have the same popularity, wasn't at the same kind of level that it had been at. But I just started going to these games and was like, no one's ever really told these guys stories. There's nowhere out there. When I was in undergrad, all the players and stuff, there was nowhere for them to have their stories told. Yeah. And why don't I try and do that? And so it just kind of started from there. And it was a way for several years. I think the only way it gave me something consistent in my life when I was really struggling to find consistency and to make sense of loss. Because before a month before my dad's accident, my best friend actually had taken his own life. So it was a really jarring time for me and a traumatic time. And I didn't really know what to do. And it just gave me something to do while I was figuring it out. I had no idea what I was going to do for work. I had no idea what I was going to do in life. I was pretty lost. And just going to the different games and driving around and stuff, back then I made it in my brain. It was much more of a big deal than certainly I think anyone else took it as. Probably coaches, players, friends. They were all kind of like, why is someone spending this much time with this league? But for me, in my mid to late 20s, and I had a lot of arrested development back then. So I was really not maturity wise there after everything had happened. It was like, it just kind of gave me something consistent to do while I kind of pieced everything together. I know I've described it like this before, and certainly nowhere near as dramatic or inspiring, but like in the movie Forrest Gump, when he just kind of starts running across the country back and forth while his brain is kind of making sense of all the different traumas, of all the different losses that he's had in life and all the different things that he's been through. And he just kind of ran to kind of like put the past behind him, they say in there. It was kind of like that for me, was just doing something consistently while my brain could kind of start to process everything and start to try and put the pieces back together and figure out, what do I do with the rest of my life, And at the time I thought, I want to be a writer, and that's what I'm going to do. And this is going to be the stepping stone to that. But somewhere along the way, I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do professionally. I had opportunities to really make a career out of journalism. It would have involved moving. It would have involved covering things that weren't college basketball, America East, that sort of stuff. And I just kind of realized, this isn't, I love America East and covering that, but being a professional journalist and kind of bouncing around, it's an industry that continues to be in flux, and it's not a place that's easy to make a career out of, and just realizing you're going to have to go places and live places and cover things that are not what you are passionate about, but that's the nature of the game. I kind of really, this isn't what I want to do, but covering the league helped me start to try and figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life.
Sam, what was your major at Northeastern?
So I got my graduate degree in journalism. My undergrad degree is in English. So yeah, but it was one of those degrees that I bounced around from a bunch of different schools, and like I just like to write. And so I took so many English classes that it was like, oh man, I got to figure out a major, and I've got transfer credits from a million different schools. And oh wow, I'm all the way basically at an English degree. So let me just do that. And also in undergrad, I doubled in history, but that was just kind of a product of like the classes that I took when I had no direction and no real parental guidance or anything. You know, in hindsight, I wish that I was more available to and had more guidance to really have a plan in undergrad. Because I think it would have helped me out a lot more, and I wouldn't have had all of this kind of bouncing around. You know, English is a wonderful thing, and literature and all that stuff. It enriches all of us so much as people, but it's not an easy degree to make a career out of. So,
Sam, share with me how this piece came about. ABC News.
Oh yeah, that was crazy, because that was a couple of years after One Bid Wonders came to an end. I ended One Bid Wonders in 2015, and that I think was 2017. So the way that story came about, and I was shocked, was so a kid that had written for me for One Bid Wonders named Martin Kessler, who went on to be a producer for Only a Game on NPR, which was a wonderful show that I listened to as a kid all the way up until it just came to an end this year, which is a real tragedy, because it really focused on the human interest aspect of sports, all different levels. Well, anyways, Martin had written for me for One Bid Wonders during the final years. Great writer, went on to getting a career as a producer. In March 2017, he contacted me and said, hey, you know, we're doing all this March Madness content. I'd really love to have you as a guest and do a story on you and on One Bid Wonders, because of the nature of One Bid Wonders, it being that personal connection with my dad. So I said, hey, sure. You know, I don't know why you want to have me on the show, but yeah, we can do it. That'd be cool. And we did it. And then maybe a month later, if that, I just happened to check my LinkedIn profile, and I had a message on there. I never used LinkedIn because I was a teacher at that point, and I've been a teacher. And teachers don't use LinkedIn. We use School Spring. But there was like a message in there, and it was this guy, producer for ABC News. And I was just like, he said he wanted to do a story on me, and I was kind of shocked. David Fazekas is his name, and he was a producer for ABC News, and I just was like, really? And we talked a lot, and he asked for contacts for different people and photos and different things, and I sent him it, and then he flew out and he interviewed me and filmed me and you know, interviewed me twice, and I kind of wasn't expecting it, and all of a sudden it was up, and that was crazy. You know, it's too bad it didn't happen when I was doing One Bid Wonders, because who knows what it would have happened for the trajectory of the website. But, you know, in all honesty, by the time, you know, I think things played out the way that they should have played out with One Bid Wonders. I couldn't have done it forever. And I wound up, I think I'm a much better teacher than I was a writer, and much happier to be doing that. But it was pretty cool. But it is funny to think about, you know, what would have happened to the site if we had kept One Bid Wonders going for another 2 years, and the site had been going when UMBC became the first 16 seed to ever, you know, beat a one, and they had done that documentary on me. You know, that all would have happened in like a 12-month span. That would have been something. But you know, that's just the way things kind of played out.
Yeah, what I find fascinating about your stories, not just One Bid Wonders, or you had this drive to follow the America East teams, but it's figuring out where that drive came from, and knowing that you were so close to your dad, and just how his death impacted you. I had opportunity to interview Todd Marinovich, who had that ESPN 30 for 30 special about him, and just the connection where he still loves his dad. And he said it might have been misguided love, but he knew his dad loved him. And then Corrine McCandless, who her brother was Chris McCandless, John Krakauer's book Into the Wild, and how everything happened with that family. And just it drove him, as you said, just to drive around in your vehicle to find that mental space to come to terms with everything that took place.
Yeah.
When you talk to different people that have gone through tragedy or adversity or ask you how you get through, is it as simple as driving, or share with us the context of
No,
that?
I think it's different for everyone. And I think that it's really important. And it took me a really long time to figure this out. And I really didn't really start to put my life together until I reconnected with my now wife, right around the same time, a little bit before the documentary came out. And she's had a background, and she's social work, and she was a clinical director for several years. Now she runs her own private practice. But she really, I'd never been in therapy. I'd never done anything like that. And, I've been in therapy, kind of in and out of it, but like since her, and she's also given me someone to really share it with and to kind of process everything with. And I think it's really important that we get help for these things, which so many people don't do. And I see it from her and the work that she does. She works with trauma survivors, and just how important it is to not be going through this stuff alone. And if I had, I think, been able to, I mean, certainly if I had her in my life sooner, but, if I had found a therapist, that I connected with and did that kind of work with, and just didn't keep all that stuff inside for so long, I think I would have been able to have started moving forward sooner. I think it's just really important that we don't go through things alone, and we don't keep this sort of stuff inside, because it's really hard to deal with all these feelings of whatever it may have been, whatever the trauma or the tragedy may have been. It's hard to face these things out, head on and be talking about them, and it's painful. So we don't want to do that. But in the long run, it's way better to start doing the trauma work, doing the healing, doing all that sort of stuff, and not carrying it inside. Than people carry things inside for 10, 20, 30 years, the rest of their life, and they're never able to fully move forward.
Yeah, I enjoyed how you just said that forward, because I think some people want us to move on. I don't think we move on, but we can move forward.
I agree so much with that. And, I'll never forget when and this was very soon after my dad died. Unfortunately, I saw a lot of from my dad. And then also, years later, back in 2016, my mom was killed in a car accident. So it's, both parents separately is crazy. But I saw it again when my mom passed away, that I saw a lot of the not good stuff, the way that people deal with grief, with both of their families, different people. People have a need to place blame, and it often gets kind of unloaded on loved ones, on people that were close to people who died. It's really sad. But after my dad had died, there was a lot of real unpleasantness with members of his family, and one member of his family kind of said to me, and I'm 19, kind of about like collecting his stuff from his dad, my grandfather's house, was like, closure is needed. And this is like a month after he died. And it's like, closure? What are you talking about? I'm closure. I'm not even processing this yet. And we never are able to move on from things like this, but we're able to deal with them over time. And everybody heals at a different rate. Like I said, I think it's really important for people to get help and not keep things inside. But you don't ever like get over it. You're able to, the way that you phrased it, I think was really great. But it's like, you don't ever like get over it, and where it's no longer part of your life, it's still a loss that I feel every day. But you're able to start to become a whole person again and start to move forward, not on or past it, but move forward and continue and start moving forward again in life, I think.
Yeah, when my mother-in-law passed away, the summer we got married, the pastor told us that there will be those that say, hasn't there been enough time? But he said, grieve long, grieve hard. And it doesn't matter what time of your life, maybe 20 years from now, maybe 50 years from now.
Yeah.
That you'll grieve long, grieve hard. How many siblings do you have, Sam?
I have one brother.
Older, younger?
He's younger. He's 4 years younger than me.
Did you feel pressure to lead being the oldest?
I don't know. I think me and my brother's relationship is pretty complex, and I wouldn't say that we are the closest. And we've handled things differently. I do think that I put a lot of pressure on myself after my dad, and then after our mom died as well, years later, to try and like look out for him and do the right thing. And I wouldn't say that that really worked out best for me. Um, I think I thought if just take care of everybody, things will work out. And in hindsight, I think I've heard the expression that like if you're in a plane, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first if they come down before you can put someone else's on, and that's something that I didn't really ever take to heart. And I definitely see the merit of that phrase now in hindsight.
Sam, have you sought out mentors or different role models to connect yourself with, or do you feel like your wife fills some of those voids?
Well, she's definitely a role model for me, even though she's 5 years younger than me. She's someone that she's been through a tremendous amount. She's completely self-made. She is just amazing at what she does, and she's an amazing person in the things that she's overcome and the things that she's dealt with, and without getting into specifics on that, she's definitely the person that's one of my two heroes, the other being my 4-year-old son. But she is definitely a role model for me, and the person that I strive to be more like, and to be like. I don't think I'll ever get to her level, but she's who I strive to be like. I think over the years I gravitated towards different people that I admired, that I came into cross paths with, largely that were in the America East, players, coaches. And I never explicitly said it to them. And I don't think it would have been fair to them at the time to be saying that, oh, hey, I look at you as kind of a role model. But there were people that I tried to emulate. And I think over the years, as I've gotten older and older, more and more of those people kind of, you see that they're, they're human and they're fallible, and but there's still a few that I look up to that I to this day. Austin Ganley is a guy who played for UNH. He was a senior in college when I was a senior in high school, who I've connected with, and he's someone that I really look up to as a father, as a person. A guy Stain Don't, who played for BU, is someone that I really, really, really look up to as a father and as a person. Stain's advice and provided me a tremendous amount of help when I was going through some tougher times. I think one of my best friends is Nick Billings, who was the arch enemy of Vermont during the Coppenrath years. But he's a guy that I wouldn't say is a role model, but Nick and I kind of struggled together with things over the years, and we got really, really close. And he's someone that I could be just honest with about struggles and kind of human failings that we all have. I think I probably wish that I had built more of a support system when I was going through all of it, reached out more to people. But my wife is the big one, definitely.
So Sam Perkins makes some time on Twitter. It's at One Bid Wonders. Instagram is Echoes in an Empty Arena. So with your son, there's nothing like being a dad. Would you have any objections if he grew up a Vermont Catamounts fan?
It's funny. There's a lot of layers to that one there, but I very much am of the school of thought with my son that I am try to support him in whatever he's passionate about, trying to introduce him to everything, and then let him kind of create his own path and just support him. My dad was like that with me in sports, and sports were such a huge part of my life and athletics until my dad's death. And he didn't force me into it, even though he was a great athlete. He introduced me to stuff, and I just really took to it and was really passionate about it. My son is 4 right now. He is extremely musical. That doesn't come from me. I have no musical background at all. He is like, everyone's kid is special and is amazing. And everyone says, oh, my kid's a prodigy or whatever. And say anything like that. All I will say is that he has been, when he was really young, he was a little verbally delayed, and he got early intervention help for that. But before he could speak, he could sing. and he could um, pick up music. And he's like an audio visual learner. And he started this past year playing with the Northeastern and the BU pep bands at their basketball games, and started off with a toy trumpet. He just loved music, and he went to the game. I took him to the games because I was like, oh, this is cool. My dad started taking me, and he was just so enthralled with the bands. We already knew that he was about music. And then the Northeastern band, one day, he wanted to bring his toy plastic trumpet to the game, and they like beckoned him over and asked him if he wanted to play with them. And it just from there, it just took off, and he picked up all the moves and could listen to the music, and he would be able to point out just from hearing it one time through all the different instruments, like this is the tubas, this is the trumpet, that's the drums, that's the guitar. And then I got him, it's called a pocket trumpet, which is like a real brass trumpet, but it's compacted down. And it's for adults. And I got it, and I knew nothing about musical instruments, wind instruments. And I thought, oh, you're just blowing it, whatever. But I've learned with wind instruments, with a trumpet, it's different than a saxophone where you have to vibrate your lips.
Yeah.
And so when it came in the mail, I blew into it, and it wasn't making any noises. And my wife, who is very musical, blew into it and wasn't making any noises. And I looked up videos. I was like, oh, is this broken? And then I saw like the way that you make sounds, and I'm like, oh, my son Jack's not going to be able to do this. So I had to talk with him. He's only 3. Like, hey, bud, this came. You knew it was coming, but you might not be able to make any noise for a while. And as soon as he picked it up, he's blowing, and he's making it make music, and he can hear and play along and do all these different notes, and all these parents gush about their kids. So I don't want to be, I'm sure it could be lost in that, but like the conductor for BU, my son does some lessons with him now over Zoom, and the conductor for Northeastern, when COVID hit, my son started doing like Zoom jam sessions with the bands for the 2 schools. They're amazed. They said that a kid that's 4, and at the time he was 3 when he first started playing a real trumpet, should not be able to make sound. That, we're talking about 8, 9 years old is when kids tend to start being able to pick up the trumpet, start to learn how to make noise on it. And he like plays along. He does all the different notes. He'll listen to a song once through, and after hearing it once, he can pick up and play along. And he keeps cadence and beat and melody and all that. It's really remarkable. If he grew up a Vermont fan, it's he can be a fan of whoever he wants. It would be great if he got into sports. I would love that. But I'm going to love whatever he does as long as he's passionate about something. Right now, he's passionate about trains and about music. So we go watch freight trains all the time together, and I set him up for music. He was going to this summer to play with the BU band. I got a lot of Instagram videos up of him playing with the BU band. COVID restrictions now, he can't really play with any of the bands right now. But we make do on Zoom. We make do him watching old videos of the bands, and he plays along with them. And the University of Vermont I have a lot of complex feelings about it. I love the time back then. There's been stuff as of late that has come out with the athletic department that to me is really, it's really, 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 really been upsetting to learn. And it's been another thing of me to have to try and make peace with Kendall Ware's situation, and he's a swimmer at the University of Vermont, and there allegedly was raped by a men's basketball player, and the alleged handling by the athletic department there has been really, if it went down the way it is alleged, it is a real disgrace. And this is stuff that I've learned over time, because as a teacher, which I've been doing now for 6 years, 2 years ago I got a job as a teacher in a school that was connected with the girls' residential, and 90% of my students were sexual trauma survivors. And I really became trauma informed. There's a lot of trainings, a lot of learning stuff. Also, my wife has been instrumental in me learning about trauma and sexual trauma and the fallout from that. And it's just, to me, it's really, if what is alleged to have happened, it's just everything that you're not supposed to do in handling these things, and people in positions of power. And as far as, protecting victims, protecting women, it's a real real tragedy. And I never advocate for people to lose jobs, but if it went down the way it went down, there are people that should not be keeping their jobs up there. It's just horrific to hear about and so upsetting on so many levels. And then seeing, I understand that maybe the school can't say anything because there's litigation, although it's not the school being sued. It's like part of a Title IX lawsuit with a bunch of people, but maybe they can't comment outright. But, I've seen different people in certain segments of Vermont fandom. I won't say most or all at all, but certain people that are trotting out these really kind of ignorant feelings on it. Like, well, how could she have, if she was raped, why would she have stayed with the person overnight afterwards? Or why wouldn't she have pressed charges? And it's like, when you learn about trauma, you learn about that something like that's right. A violation on that level in an assault in the most intimate part of our lives as humans. It changes our brains and it damages our brains in a level that we don't act logically and rationally in the immediate aftermath of something like that. And sometimes people stay with their attacker right afterwards because their brain subconsciously is trying to take back control over the situation where they lost all control of the most intimate part of our lives. And there's just a lot of ignorant rhetoric I've seen out there in some way trying to excuse away or defend or discredit her. And I feel like the university, the America East Conference, they all have an obligation to, if they're not going to comment directly on this because of ongoing litigation, these are institutions, the University of Vermont Athletics, the America East Conference, that have been very progressive during these times, speaking out on things like racism and creating safe spaces and being allies. And then something like this happens in your own backyard. You have to do the right thing and you have to take a stance on it, or else it's just empty platitudes that you're spouting out there in these hypothetical situations. Yeah, we're allies, but when it actually happens, we just pretend it didn't happen and we stay silent. And I just feel like there's a lot of ignorance that needs to be addressed and corrected on sexual violence and sexual assault that is not being talked about. And I see just this kind of false narrative of, well, it couldn't be a sexual assault because the person did this or didn't do this or didn't do this afterwards. And it's like, that's not how it actually plays out in real life. And so I went on this long diatribe here, but it's very, to me, as someone who has loved ones that are trauma survivors, had students that meant the world to me. I've moved on from that school, but more because of life changes, because of what we had to move to a different part of the state and stuff. But it left a lasting impact, and I learned so much about the long-term fallout and effects and impacts of trauma and sexual violence. And to see this happen and to see it handled the way it was, and to see the silence afterwards is really upsetting. And I hope that they do the right thing. I hope that the university somehow does the right thing out of such a horrific situation. And, if that's done, it will bring me back to feeling, being able to be open to being maybe a Vermont fan again. But right now I can't be a supporter of that athletic program or that team while this had happened and how it's been handled. And it doesn't tarnish the love I have for the program historically. It was under Tom Brennan and under, those guys were all top-notch individuals, the players, the coaches, everything. And I'd always heard and seen that it was such a class organization. And, so I have nothing but love for those teams and those eras and those players, and affection for all of them. And I'm still putting up all these videos and stuff, which has been really fun during this time. But in the present right now, I don't see that I can have any sort of a connection with that university while they're handling this the way they're handling it.
Well, I certainly agree and understand where you're coming from. I'm not as informed about the situation as you are, but I served as a director of mentoring for 9 years, and certainly seeing students, when the school would say, "Did you see the paper?" it was not a positive thing.
Yeah.
And is where we need to be a voice and stand up, whether it's, racism or this situation or others, I think we've been given the opportunity to be a voice and to take that stand to to inform others of what's been going on. So Sam, thank you so much for sharing that. Um, yeah, talk to me now. You're a teacher. How are you doing during COVID with this virtual learning, this hybrid learning? How are you holding up?
Well, it was, last year when COVID happened, it was really crazy. And there was, I would say, right when it first happened to me, there was such a feeling of like, even though we're all apart, at least kind of we're all in this together. And it was crazy. And I worked so much harder as a teacher during COVID than I did, teaching remotely than I did in person ever. It was so much more time into lesson planning and teaching my kids via Zoom. And I'm a special ed teacher. So my students have different behaviors and struggles and they learn differently. And so trying to teach, it was so challenging. And I put so much more to my lesson planning than ever before. So, when I see people saying that, teachers just don't want to be in the building. They don't want to, like, that's in my experiences, that is not the case there. Because it's so much easier to teach under normal circumstances in your classroom. And I had it, and I had my son with me every day, and I'm teaching, and he's, was 3 at the time last year and was struggling because it was his first year of preschool, and then his school shut down, and he had all this anxiety over all these changes to his routine, and he's climbing all over me and putting his trumpet up to my head and playing it while I'm trying to teach my kids about ancient Egypt via Zoom. So it was crazy, but I think there was this real feeling of we're all in this together. And, I feel like at some point along the way that spirit and that feeling has gotten lost, which is sad to me. I'm currently not teaching right now. My plan is to be a teacher for the rest of my life. That's what I want to do. I've been helping my wife. She launched her own private practice. Also, a big thing was just real concerns over safety, over a whole bunch of different reasons made me at the last minute. And there were childcare issues and different things that made it that returning to the classroom right away was not an option. So I am unemployed right now, like a lot of Americans, which is a very scary time and a very scary position to be in. But doing the best, really trying to make the most of all the time with my son. I got really emotional when I was talking to my wife about it the other day. Well, I guess this was like a month back now, but talking about, realizing that, as a parent, when he was out of school and he's, my only child, and I don't have my parents to be able to kind of pick their brain about things. And I feel a lot of the time like I don't know what I'm doing as a parent. And when COVID happened and every day was so stressful, and of, trying to teach my class and trying to like worried about his development, first year of school, suddenly he's not in it anymore. He had like one Zoom class a week with his preschool, and there would be all this work and activities and stuff they'd be giving us every day. But like a lot of the time it would just fall by the wayside. Like I'd be like, oh my God, I don't know. All right, Jack, let's just go to the train station for 2 hours and we'll talk about the trains and stuff and feel great. Okay, I got him out of the house. But then you get home and it's like, oh man, we didn't do any of this work that he has. And am I letting him down developmentally and be like on the verge of tears or in tears, feeling like I'm letting him down and failing him as a parent and not doing the right thing. But, when I was talking to my wife the other day or the other week, I guess, I was saying that as crazy and as scary and as stressful as it was, it's really emotional to think about it coming to an end, even though it's right for the best for him, for the best for everything. When the country goes back to normal and life goes back to normal, that, I got 6 months, right, or however long of every single day having all this time with him. And I will never get that much time with my son ever again, consistently, because he'll be in school, I'll be in work, he'll be growing, that's the nature of being a parent. That's the nature of kids growing up. But it was very emotional to me, because I just felt like, man, I'm never going to get this time again. And it is the craziest time that I've been alive and scariest and all that stuff. But there's a lot of beauty and a lot of amazing things if you look for them that came out of it as well. I'm not saying this is a good thing, or I'm glad, not at all. That's not where I'm going with it. But just that there was a lot of beauty and a lot of amazing things that happened.
Sure.
Are things that I will never get those opportunities again.
And that's maximizing that opportunity.
Yeah.
I remember I got laid off from a job way back when. My son just he's a freshman in college now. And I remember that 3 months or whatever it was that I didn't have a job. It was just so special to spend with my son, riding bikes around the Stowe Vermont bike path and doing some different things. And everybody told me, like, Jeff, enjoy it because it goes so quick. Before you know it, he's going to graduate and be out of the house. And you've probably heard that over and over, but I want to tell you, it does go fast. And man, I miss my boy, but just enjoy the moments. And what you learned from your dad, you are teaching your son. And man, it's just amazing that you would share your story with us. And just thank you so much for being open, honest, vulnerable, but just taking that next step forward. It's great. So thanks, Sam.
No, I appreciate you having me on, Jeff. It's been a really long time. It made me think about when we used to talk back during the day, and life changes. And I guess, you went on your own path and haven't been on the radio for a while. I kind of lost track of a lot of America East media guys, different people when I was no longer doing it. And, but it's cool to see you doing it again. You're always a great interviewer. And I like that you get into actually what makes people. That was always one of the kind of big draws about talking with you. I felt like it wasn't just like X's and O's. Here's who's good. Here's what's going to happen in this game. It was like, talking more about kind of the human condition, which was always really enjoyable. So I appreciate it. It's cool to do an interview. I haven't done one in a really long time, kind of spur of the moment thing. It was really great. I'll keep watching. You've had some good shows that I've seen. So
thanks, man. And we'll be in touch. And thanks so much, Sam. Again, that's Sam Perkins. You can find him Twitter, One Bid Wonders, and Instagram. I love this. Echoes in an Empty Arena. Make sure you check out his Instagram post as well. So my name is Jeff Fuller, Jay Fuller Interviews, Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube. Certainly subscribe there. Join the Facebook group, Jay Fuller Interviews. Instagram and Twitter. Yes, the same name, Jay Fuller Interviews. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much, and wish you all the best. Make time to listen to somebody's story because it will certainly make your story better. Thanks all.